Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Kaplan, and my mission is to make psychology accessible to all. In today's video, we are going to be talking about common cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are ways that your mind can trick you into believing something that's not actually true. And this is something we all do. However, in therapy, identifying cognitive distortions is one of the hallmark characteristics of cognitive behavioral therapy. And the cognitive distortions that we're going to mention today, I want to credit three people with their contributions. First is Dr. David Burns, Dr. Aaron Beck, and finally, Dr. Albert Ellis. These three individuals have helped us with a roadmap to identifying cognitive distortions. But without further ado, let's get into it. The first cognitive distortion that we will talk about is something called all or nothing thinking. You might even hear it referred to as black and white thinking. This distortion doesn't allow us to see shades of gray. It doesn't allow us to see what's happening in the middle. So we tend to think in extremes. A person might say that they're either fantastic or awful. They're either perfect or a total failure. And that dichotomy is unhelpful because usually you're setting yourself up for criticism and failure because no one can be entirely perfect. And if you use all or nothing or black and white thinking, that's going to leave you dissatisfied with yourself. Now, another example of a cognitive error is something which we call overgeneralization. So an overgeneralization is when you take a singular event and make it the rule. So on the right, you have a gentleman driving a bus, and they're driving, they get a green light, green light, green light, green light, and then they get one red light. And an overgeneralization would be if a person said, story of my life. So automatically that one event is being cast over everything the person experiences. So we have to be careful to scale back to reality, right? So another example is if you don't complete one task, you feel that because you didn't complete that one task, you're gonna be unsuccessful at all tasks. Another example is a mental filter. And this occurs in several ways, but the most common way we do this is that we pay attention to only certain evidence. Usually we focus on our failures and we disregard our successes, right? So that is what a mental filter is. The other example I give is if you have a romantic partner who focuses on one negative comment made by their partner, and as a function of that, they ignore all of the other positive comments, praise, experience that they have. This isn't going to be helpful, right? Because internalizing only the negative will block the positive. Now, the other example is disqualifying or discounting the positive. And what we tend to do in this case is if something positive happens, we say, yeah, but. Anytime you hear, yeah, but, that person is discounting or disqualifying the positive. So they're acknowledging it, but they're saying it doesn't fully count. So that would be discounting the positive. So an example of that is, let's say a person receives a positive review or feedback at work. They might reject the belief that they're competent because they might say, oh, well, that person's just easy on everybody. Their review doesn't count. Now, other things that are problematic is something called mind reading. Mind reading refers to when we assume that we know what someone else is thinking. Oftentimes, when we do this, we're incorrect. And the best way to challenge mind reading is to do something called a checkout. I understood you to say or believe ... Did I get you correct? Now, but we make a lot of mistakes when we try and read another person's mind. And as a function of that, if we don't verify how we interpreted those events or their belief, then that could lead to things like depression, anxiety, social phobias, things of that nature. Another one of these examples is fortune telling. Fortune telling is when we think that we could predict the future, even though we don't have enough evidence. So if we take our experience now and project it all the way into the future, that's fortune telling. A good example of this is, let's say you have a person who is struggling in dating, and for whatever reason, they were in a relationship and it doesn't work out. They take that experience and they say, see, I'm not destined to find love, or I'll never find love or have a happy relationship. Saying that it's never going to happen in the future is fortune telling. Catastrophizing. This individual, they tend to expect the worst. And you see, I put Stuart Little, save your lives, the sky is falling, run, run, run. So catastrophizing is always expecting the worst or exaggerating the difficulties you're in. And this is a similar process to magnification. So what is magnification and minimization? So magnification is when you amplify or blow out of proportion the importance of something. Minimization is when you ignore or lower the value of important aspects. So typically, magnification happens in therapy where a person's magnifying the negative or magnifying their undesirable traits, whereas minimization, they tend to discount their desirable qualities. So you could see this is very similar to the mental filter and discounting the positive, because what you're doing is you're selectively choosing information that's self-critical or harmful to you while ignoring the rest. Emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is to think that just because you feel something, it must be true, right? So I feel it, therefore it must be true. No, it's important to understand that our feelings are real, our feelings are valid, but our interpretation or the narratives we write around our feelings are not always accurate. So on the right, a person may say, I feel left out. And that's the emotion, like feeling alienated or left out. So they interpret that as, see, this must mean that I'm not good enough, or everyone hates me, or I should just stay home from now on. All of these kind of narratives, that's emotional reasoning, when a person may just have been left out due to circumstance. Now, Albert Ellis, he's known for telling people don't should on themselves or masturbate, right? So these are just ways that people use words to judge themselves. And usually, well, I guess it could be judge themselves or other people. When they say should or must or ought to, anytime you have these kind of language, it's an expectation. And that expectation, it's possible that it's not going to be met. And it comes with negative judgment and criticism, whether it be towards oneself or other people. Now, on the right, there's an artist who did a lot of these cognitive distortions on a picture, and I like this one. And she noted that if people use the word should or must towards themselves, it usually results in guilt, anger, and resentment. Whereas if it's used towards other people, it's you have bitterness, anger, judgment, etc. So labeling and mislabeling. We tend to label as a way of categorizing or understanding our world around us. But it is possible that we are assigning labels to ourselves or other people that are inaccurate or harmful, right? So if you label a person, oh, he's a whiner or she's a phony, or even labeling yourself, I'm just useless, right? Things like that. These are extreme forms of overgeneralization. And, they're easy to pick apart because they're in absolute. Well, does that person always whine? So how is he a whiner? Is you think this person is never authentic? You think that you're useless in all ways? These are ways that we ask questions to challenge labeling. Personalization. Personalization is to turn inward our experience and think it's all about us, right? So if something bad happens, it's due to us, or if there's some kind of criticism, we say, well, it's due to something I either said or did. So we turn inward and we tend to blame ourselves for absolutely everything that goes wrong in our life. And this is described by Burns as the mother of all guilt. In all situations, a person isn't 100% to blame for what's going on. There are circumstances outside of their control, but to personalize it is harmful. Now, the opposite, instead of turning inward, is to turn outward, where we blame. So it's his fault, her fault, their fault, but not my fault, right? So an example of blaming or pointing the finger at other people is, you made me feel bad. And that's a cognitive error because we're not taking responsibility for how we interpret what was said, and we're not taking responsibility for our feelings, our emotions. So turning it outward, it's not helpful, right? Now, this is pretty cool. Fallacies of control. So there are two kinds of fallacies of control. A person may feel helpless, right, where they believe that they have absolutely no control, or they believe that they have 100% control over an outcome. But whether it's you have no control or complete control, that's damaging, right? Because we rarely have 100% control over our situation. So now, fairness, expecting a just world, expecting fairness is a fallacy. The world is full of injustice. The world is full of unfairness, but people will cause themselves significant emotional distress expecting fairness, expecting the world to balance itself out and be just. And that's going to leave you angry, resentful, and having a negative attitude towards everything you face if you maintain the fallacy of fairness. Fallacy of change. This one is common, especially in relationships, where we think that if we say the right thing, or we encourage the right way, or if we criticize someone, they're going to change. And in therapy, we try and highlight that this is a fallacy. The only person you have control over changing is yourself. When it comes to changing other people, It doesn't work, because either they're going to change and resent you for forcing them to change, or they're not going to change and you're going to be resentful that they didn't. So on the right, I took the screen capture of, don't try and change people, just love them. Love is what actually changes us, right? So the more you try and force change, it's not going to help. All right. Now, always being right. Nobody is 100% correct all the time, right? So it's to believe that we are always right is a problem. And it causes a lot of conflict, because people will go to great lengths to prove that they're right, even at the expense of other people's feelings, or even at the expense of a relationship. So we have to be very careful not to believe that we're always correct or always right. So heaven's reward fallacy. This is the belief that if we suffer, if we do the hard work, we're going to somehow be rewarded. So on the right, you see the scales. According to the sacrifice, that means you're owed something. The reality is, similar to fairness, no one said you're going to get back what you put in. No one said that you're going to be rewarded according to your struggles or suffering. The expectation of fairness and reward is going to result in disappointment. So it's not always the case that we reap what we sow. And those are some of the more common cognitive errors. I hope this is useful to you, whether you're thinking about this from outside of the treatment room and you're like, well, hey, I was wondering how sometimes I may make the wrong decisions or jump to the wrong conclusions. This cognitive distortion list, it's a good starting point for you. Now, if you're in the therapy room, I recommend keeping track of all your distortions and working with your therapist to challenge some of these. So if you liked the video, if you found it useful, give me a big thumbs up, click the like button, subscribe, click the notifications tabs. This is one of the ways that YouTube determines the usefulness of the video and shares it with a larger audience. As I mentioned, my mission is to make psychology more accessible, and in doing so, you help me with that. If there was a specific cognitive distortion that you relate to and you want to start a conversation, put it in the comment section below. I read and respond to all of the comments, and I look forward to hearing from you. But until next time, take care, everybody.